Today I'm going to record a YouTube video. I still hate looking at a camera and talking to it. That's a skill I've not developed yet, but that's okay, we're going to do this anyways. I recently finished writing another book, kind of. I finished the first draft. It's called Agent of Change. It's equal to the first book I wrote. It's the second book in a planned trilogy. It came out to about, I believe it was just under 130,000 words. So, pretty nice length, the longest one I've written so far. I learned a lot from writing it, and I'm gonna, I've ordered copies, a couple of physical copies that I printed from Barnes & Noble Press. So they'll be here eventually. Whenever those show up, I'll make a video talking about what I've learned from that whole experience. So for now, I'm going to focus on the next book I'm working on here. It's called The Flame Between Us. This is the first draft of it that I've got. It's about 83,000 words or so. So I'm working on draft 2. I want it to be about 150,000 words, so almost twice as long, which is going to be interesting. I think it won't be that hard. A lot of this is pretty underwritten. It's lacking in detail and description in a lot of places, and just inner monologue. It's a lot of just dialogue and action beats. There's a little bit of narration from like certain characters, but not enough. And so I'm gonna work on adding a lot more of that into it. That's the biggest thing, is just rewriting it with more description and narrative and navel gazing. Hopefully not too much, but definitely more. I'm going to focus on getting more voice into the characters and just keep making sure their characterization feels even throughout. I have made some changes to the plot, not super significant. The general gist of the story is pretty much the same, and the characters are more or less the same, just a little bit more refined. As you can see on this wall right here, on this window, I have been little note cards for every chapter. So one note card is equal to one chapter. I don't know if this will focus, but it's probably not going to focus. I'll just read it to you. This is the first one. Henri Batiste arrives in Dune Vern, meets with the governor, and sets off toward Tucana Valley. High level, broad picture beats. So like each sentence is basically one scene. And obviously I've written the book already, so I've got most of the plot figured out, but I did want to change a couple of things. Some of the biggest changes, I'm adding a third party kind of that's floating around in the background, or maybe I should say swimming around. Really I should say fifth party, because I'll do a very minor plot synopsis just so you guys know what's going on. So basically this takes place on this continent called Isoloth. It's far to the north. You can picture like the Antarctica, or I guess the Arctic Circle, because Antarctica is in the south. Yeah, so it takes place far to the north, close to the pole of this world, Alva, and basically there's a tribe that lives there called the Chukka tribe, and they've lived there for 1,000 years-ish, and they basically just chill there, do their thing, live their lives, and everything's good. But about 10 years ago, immigrants from Roseland, colonists, started showing up, and they've started colonizing just a little corner of the thing. So not a big deal, but they are cutting out their little corner of the continent, and they've been developing there and slowly getting a little bit bigger. The outpost is growing, and there's been some soft, light communication between the Chukka tribe and the Roselandi colonists. It's been going well so far. They trade a little bit. The Chukka tribes help them a little bit with pastoralizing the cattle there and getting a foothold in. They've been on generally good terms, and the Roselandi have been able to give some technology because they have superior technology. They've been able to trade a little bit of that towards the Chukka tribe. So there's definitely some themes of American colonization. Those themes are going to be reflected in here. You can think of the Roselandi as like British, and I'm thinking I'm even going to have them kind of speak a British dialect, because that just feels natural to me. Actually, they're going to speak a British dialect. The ones from the city and the ones from the country are going to speak like American country, because I think that'll be funny. That's the tentative plan. I'm gonna have to see if that actually makes sense, but we're gonna try that. Yeah, so there's the Chukka tribe and the Roselandi settlers. Their little outpost is called Dune Vern, and the Chukka tribe live in Tucana Valley. It's pretty straightforward. Other than that, there is a third party called the Varians. They live in a secret outpost colony called Ankh-Var. They're basically defects from Roselands who are, for all intents and purposes, pirates. I said that weird. They're pirates. And so they basically subsist off of stealing supplies from incoming Roselanding merchant ships. It's a questionable existence, and definitely morally questionable, but they've been low-key enough, if you will, that the Roselands pretty much ignored them, because it hasn't been that big of a deal. But they've been getting more and more adventurous with their raids, so the Roseland Empire is going to be taking notice soon. So there's definitely some tension brewing there. And so this new plot element that I'm adding, I guess it's only the fourth party, not the fifth, but they're tentatively called the Lost Tribe right now. I don't have a other name for them, but the idea that I've come up with is they used to be part of the Chukka tribe roughly 500 years ago, but after a big disagreement they split up into two different groups, and they've been living on their own kind of in secret. And the Chukka tribe, there's rumors, they kind of suspect that they exist, but they haven't really seen them, and they haven't been able to communicate with them, so they're kind of just doing their own things, keeping to their own, and everybody's happy like that. That's all the backstory. Basically the setup is one of our protagonists, Henri Batiste, the youngest captain ever in the Roseland army. He's only like 22 or something, probably. I haven't decided how old, maybe only 20. He's like the youngest captain ever. He's a hot shot, thinks a lot of himself. He's a great duelist, so he does have something to back it up, but he also has trouble controlling his temper. And so he's coming to Roseland. He's been, stationed out there, and he's going to be doing his thing. And there's this other dude named the Governor. He's a relatively new inhabitant as well, only been living there for a couple of months in Dunvern. But he's got some nefarious plans, so as Henri arrives, he'll be put to work by the Governor, who is his direct superior. And that's one of our protagonists. The other protagonist, there's three at the start. The other one is Evie Sunagarda. She's the daughter of the tribe's chief, and she has a special ability called the Gift. The Gift lets the Chukka tribe people, they can create fire. There's like a warmth that sits inside them, right around where their diaphragm is. And they can control that warmth and draw it into their body, and they can manifest it into reality. A lot of them will snap to, that snap acts as a trigger that lets the flames come from within and materialize into the world. So that comes up a lot in the book. They'll flip fire. I basically saw Full Metal Alchemist, where Colonel Mustang would be like messing everything up, and I thought that was awesome. So I'm doing that. Because it's so cool, and I've got lore explanations to kind of justify why they snap, so it's not arbitrary necessarily. I think it's badass, so that's in the book. She's got fire, and the Governor wants her fire. Roseland doesn't have any magic by nature, and he's heard reports that she's got that flame, and he's sending Henri out to go catch that, basically. And then our third protagonist is Zav Sunagarda. He's Evie's brother. He's a little bit older. He's next in line to become chief of the tribe, but he's got one problem, and the problem is he's kind of a coward. So he's not going to make a good chief as he is right now. He's anxious and tentative and shy, and all the traits that won't make a good leader, and his father's pissed about it. And Zav just wants to succeed, but he's kind of not getting any help from anybody. He's a little bit misguided. And so this story is going to be about him finding his courage, basically. That's a very long plot synopsis that you can expect. I don't want to get into spoilers yet. I might do that in a little bit. But anyways, yeah. So the biggest change I've made from this first draft just goes through the story, barrels through really fast. I read it in like 2 days whenever I went to revise this. This rewrite, I've got these pink post-it notes, and these represent the past. So basically the story is split into 4 parts, one for each of the main characters. The first part's going to follow Zav, and basically we learn some of his backstory. So like the first one here is when Zav was 12, and in the present day he's about 19, 20. This one's from when he was 12, and it's a little vague still. I gotta iron some things out. But the idea is that like this is his first trial into boyhood. The Chukka tribe will have some interesting coming of age trials, first when they're around 12 to 13, and again when they're 19 to 20. This one, Zav's gonna like totally bomb his trial and fail it. His father will be disappointed and his mother won't be hopeful. His sister Evie will try to comfort him, but that can only go so far. Yeah, that monitor's messed up. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about this book. I think it has a lot of potential. The characters are going to be put through some really tough stuff, which makes me feel bad, but they're going to come out the other side all right. They're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be a compelling story. The plot's really exciting. I think doing these backstories is going to do so much to help develop the characters. When you see why they are the way they are and you get to realize where they're going, I think it's going to be really impactful. The world building's fun. There's these things called fen. They're basically like sheep buffaloes combined, so they're like huge sheeps that are like bigger than a man. They're like a buffalo, but they're very docile. Okay, they're not as exciting as I thought they were. There's also drakes. They're like, you can basically picture little dragons, like dragons the size of eagles. So they're small. They're not a huge threat, but if there's 5 or 6 of them attacking one person, it's going to be problematic. It's not, you don't want to be that one person. And there's some other really cool world building. There's these huge canyons all throughout the frozen lands. Canyons that are a little sus. Like, where did these canyons come from? That doesn't look natural, but our characters don't think about that too much since that's what they've known. There's these huge canyons, and the Chuka tribe anyways, they hunt the drakes, and they can build these skin suits out of the drakes because their skin is so developed to flight. They build these wingsuits, and a big part of it is actually skimming, where they jump off cliffs and they use the wingsuits to like catch the winds because there's these air currents everywhere, and so they're actually like flying around doing all these crazy stuff. That was one of the first ideas where this book came from. I saw a video of someone like base jumping down a cliff, and I was like, how do I put that into a book? And it got to here eventually. It's a pretty big part of the book, and it's so cool. There's the fire, of course, which is awesome. So there's some themes of like colonization and how that affects the natives to the land. There's some themes about nature and how living in accordance with nature will really bring you to inner peace. There's also some themes of propaganda and obeying the government. I guess there's probably a better way to say that, but yeah, like one of our protagonists, Henri, he's very indoctrinated by a dogma of his homeland, and this wasn't in the first draft so much. It was teased at, but I'm gonna push it to an almost uncomfortable extent in this draft, and I think it's gonna be kind of painful to write, but I think it's gonna strike a nerve in the right way, and it's gonna be realistic to what the human experience is capable of. I think it's gonna be uncomfortable, and that's part of what it needs to be to really land resoundingly, which is part of the hard part of writing this kind of stuff. Is it's gonna be uncomfortable to write. I think it's really gonna lead to the most compelling narrative possible, and art's about taking risks and trying scary things, because if we're not taking risks, it's just gonna be boring and not that interesting. There's one other theme, but that's like the core theme of the book, so I don't want to get into it. Hello? Making a YouTube video about the book I'm working on. Okay, we'll get into spoilers now. I'm gonna talk about the flashbacks because that was the biggest change for me, and the one I've thought the most about. All the flashbacks are still subject to change because I'm not really. There's a couple of ones that I really like, so some of those are pretty set, but some of them are very much still placeholders. So one big thing is they're all in reverse chronological order within each section. So like Zav's section, there's 4 flashbacks within Zav's section. So the first one starts when he's 12. Well, the prologue is technically the first one. That one's gonna be when he's like 16 or 17. Then there'll be one when he's 12, 8, and then there'll be one when he's like 6. As we get deeper into the story, we learn more and more about the defining events of his past that made him who he is. I think this is going to be a really cool way to build a mystery around the character, like what happened that traumatized him so much and turned him into who he is. And so there'll be one of those for each section. Like the next section focuses on Henri, will be when he's like 19 or 20, and then I think it's like 17, and then I think 13, and then I think like 10. I don't know, I forgot to write the ages on Henri's one, which is a little annoying, but whatever. The flashbacks are always nested within a pair of that POV characters chapters. Basically, if you're gonna, this is some advice I heard on the Writing Advice podcast that Brandon Sanderson and a couple other people are on. Basically, they were like, you can switch either characters or timeline, but don't switch both at the same time. So, like if I want to do a Zav flashback, it might I'll try to do this. I don't know if this mirrors, but so there'll be like maybe an Henri chapter here, and then a Zov chapter, then a Zov flashback, then another Zov chapter, and then like an Evie chapter or something. And so you want to avoid like Henri chapter, Zov flashback, Evie, Zov, like something like that, just to make it a little simpler on the reader. And like I was like skimming through Way of Kings, like Brandon Sanderson sticks to that for that thing. I'm pretty sure in The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which does a bunch of flashbacks, I'm pretty sure she sticks to that format. Although that also only has like 2 POVs, so it's kind of a different scenario. I was in the middle of recording this and I heard my roommates talking. This shit literally just showed up. Speaking of, so this is the book I just wrote. Boom, Church of Luna, Agent of Change by Trip Church. Oh, that's so awesome. 400 pages, 401 pages. This artwork is not mine. I want to make that clear. This is someone else's. I stole it off the internet and I forgot to credit them on the freaking acknowledgements. So if this is your artwork, don't worry, I'm not going to sell this. This is just for me, personal copies. I've only got like 5 copies. If it's you, just know your artwork's so great. I stole it. No, I'll look up I'll figure out who made this and I'll put it in the video description. Yeah, the past ones I've made, let's use this. Like this one is 5x8 and this one is 6x9. So I guess if you want to see what the difference looks like, it looks like more than I would have expected. It feels quite a bit bigger, but I think this is going to be way more pleasant to read. Oh yeah, this already feels so much nicer. I've gotten a little bit better at the formatting. Like, let me show you. So like this one, yeah, so it's probably mirrored, but you can see like the space for the paragraph indentation is like humongous, and then there's a bunch of space between each paragraph. And like there's page numbers at the bottom, but there's nothing else really. So the chapter pages just have a chapter thing, but then like the other pages have like the book title in the corner, and the page numbers are at the top now. It's got my name, and then the actual words are, the paragraphs are indented much less, so there's less white space. This is crazy. Wow. Oh, and the maps too. Forgot about the maps. Multiple maps for your viewing pleasure. Yeah, you can tell this is like a first draft because it's messy, but it's kind of there. Wow, this is awesome. And I mean, this shit's thick too. Like, you could tell it's like 30,000 words longer. It's a bigger book and it's still thick. Here's the back. You guys can read that if you want. Spoilers for the first book a little bit. Not really. I kept it pretty spoiler free. I use Wheel of Time as my like gold standard of how I want a book to look, because like this Towers of Midnight, for example. Yeah, their font's definitely smaller, but and they have a bunch of cool pictures and shit. Robert Jordan was writing like behemoths of books. I'm not quite there yet, although the unofficial sequel for this book is gonna probably be quite long. It wasn't originally planned as a sequel, but as I'm revising that, I'm realizing it makes sense to be a sequel. It's loose though. You won't be missing out having not read the first book, but you'll have some extra context that'll be nice. It'll probably be like 20 or 30 years afterwards. Oh, it's gonna run out of battery. Oh well. Also, I forgot to say it earlier, but like and subscribe and all that good stuff.